Hello, and welcome to Beyond the Point podcast with me, Ali Christensen. I'm curating the content I wish I had had as a dancer and creating strong, healthy, thriving dancers for the future. Not only am I your host and ex-professional dancer, but I own Align Fitness, a cross-training studio for dancers here in Costa Mesa, California, and am the creator of online courses for dancers such as the Dancer Strong program, Lower Body Flexibility, and Turnout for Dancers. Today on the podcast, we are talking about the much anticipated and slightly dreaded topic of turnout. I have been waiting to have Miss Alicia Head on the podcast to talk about such topic because she is one of my favorite educators when it comes to this topic. And she has dedicated her life to investigating ballet technique in our body. She is a past dancer. She is a master trainer in Pilates and gyrokinesis, as well as teaches gyrotonic. She is a movement expert when it comes to the dance world. She has presented at IADAMS and continues to build her education platform, the Inner Life of Ballet. As I was putting this podcast together and re-listening to our conversation, I can't believe how many nuggets, not just nuggets, like $1 million nuggets are in this episode. She was so generous with her time, and the way she puts her thoughts into words is perfect. I'm really excited for you to listen to this whole episode. Make sure you get to the meat and potatoes of this one. This will answer so many questions that I get from you guys about turnout. And Alicia is an amazing resource. So I'm really happy to introduce you to her and for you guys to hear our conversation. So let's jump into it. Welcome on the podcast, Alicia. I am so happy to have you. This has been in my mind and in the making in my mind for a very long time. So I'm very honored and excited for the dancers here on this podcast to get to know you. So thank you for taking time today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, yes. Could you do an introduction of yourself? Who are you?
Sure.
What do you do in the dance world? How did you get to this spot in the dance world?
Sure. I started dancing when I was 5. I started with ballet. I took my first ballet class when I was 5. I saw my first ballet when I was 5. Well, it all happened when I was 5. The ballet I saw was Coppelia with American Ballet Theater at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion Music Center of Los Angeles. And the ballerina was Carla Fracci, a beautiful Italian ballerina. She passed away recently. I will never, ever, ever forget that feeling. Sometimes you forget the details of an experience, what people said, what they did, but you'll never forget how you felt. Because how we store memories and things like that, it's nonlinear. So you can go right back to that and it hits you right away. A deep love of the art form formed that day, and it's inspired me ever since. I didn't have a professional career. I had too many kind of problems and injuries. I did a little bit of performing with a group called Chamber Dance, which was based in San Francisco. I was there for a little while training at a school called the Academy of Ballet with Richard Gibson and Zori Kara. The school is still there. It's incredible training. I also danced in Orange County in as part of something called the Glory of Christmas, which were these big Christmas pageants that went on for a while. I also did the Glory of Easter. Fascinating experience, and it was a good job. And then my longest affiliation was with a group called South Bay Ballet, which is in the Torrance area of California. And I danced with them for a while. And then I also taught at their school. And the school's name is Lordson Ballet Center. And the company is now renamed, and it's called Ballet California. And I ended up, as I was dancing, I ended up joining the faculty and then actually teaching there for 17 years. It's a long time. And then I've also been on the faculty of California State University, Long Beach as a lecturer, ballet lecturer. And I've taught at summer intensives for Lines and American Ballet Theater. And then I also teach year-round at the American Ballet Theater Gillespie School in Orange County. And I have presented at the International Association of Dance Medicine and Science. I did my Arabesque presentation in 2018. And I'm happy to let you know today that my Turnout abstract has been accepted.
Yay.
So I'll be presenting on Turnout this fall in Ireland.
A wonderful trip.
So let me let you talk now. That's enough of that. And those bios, it goes on, and you're just like blah blah blah. So you go ahead and say something now.
Oh, well, you have so much experience, and I've heard every time I meet with you, every time I've worked with you, there's a new detail of somewhere that you've experienced, someone you've worked with, something you've gathered. And you're just like a huge collection of information that I feel like over the years you've sifted through, experienced on your own body, played on other dancers' bodies. And now you work with dancers all over the world, I think. Thank you, Zoom. And you've been in so many places where you have truly inspired change in teachers and dancers' bodies. And that's what you're doing here locally in California, and both with your private practice of dancers and also with your program, which is why I asked you on here. So perfect that your turnout is going to be in Ireland.
Yeah.
And so
Very
many people
exciting.
are going to get to hear and experience that. I was not at the 2018 IADMs, but I had teachers who came back after, and after they say, you say, oh, what did you learn? Who was your favorite? And I'm not exaggerating. Every single one said, oh, this lady named Alicia Head, she did this thing on Arabesque. And I was like, I know who that is. That's amazing.
Wow.
So
that's great.
All that sifting that you continue to do has made it so clear for dancers and teachers to apply. The knowledge of what needs to happen is one thing. Being able to teach it well is a completely different animal in my experience. And this is where I really feel like, as teachers and also students or teachers of our own bodies, this is where we can really succeed, or we get kind of stuck in the mud. You might know what needs to happen. You might be able to look at the picture and say, these are my turnout muscles. I hear what they're saying, but being able to apply it and get your dancers to feel it is completely different. And that's where I've really gravitated towards what you do and how you teach. Tell me a little bit about your professional teaching career. So you have many different facets that you've learned and educated yourself to work with the body. So what are some of those, and how have they informed what you do today with Turnout and ballerinas?
I started my journey with learning how to teach and learning more about my own body when I was in San Francisco. I had an injury, and I started going to the St. Francis Memorial Hospital Center for Sports Medicine, which had within it a dance medicine wing. And this was in the late 1980s, and dance medicine, even as a field, really didn't emerge until the early 1980s. And the St. Francis facility was really one of the leaders in the whole movement. Dr. James Garrick was in charge of the sports medicine facility there. And then within the dance medicine facility, we had Nora St. John, who's now the educational director for Balanced Body, which is a Pilates education company based out of Sacramento. And then her colleague, Elizabeth Larkham, is internationally known. And these were my two first Pilates teachers. I started doing Pilates. I started with Pilates mat work with Elizabeth. And then when I had the injury, the physical therapist prescribed Pilates sessions. And so I was able to start learning a little bit more and working on the equipment. And you know how I said at the beginning about these memories you have that you'll never forget. Well, I remember the first ballet class I went to after having used the reformer for the first time. And we were doing Grand Plie in the center. We were going down into a full Grand Plie in Adagio. No support from the bar. And I'll never forget this. I felt so strong and so in control of my body that I knew that I knew everything was going to be okay. I knew I was going to go down in the Grand Plie, and then I could predict the future even. I knew I was going to come up, get on my legs, and be able to do whatever the skill was that was next. And this was a watershed moment for me, because prior to that, I had been stuck in this mental and psychological loop that a lot of dancers are stuck in, especially when they're young, where they think, they almost get superstitious. They think it's all about talent, and it's all about what you look like, whether the teacher likes you. And you just hope for the best. It's every exercise you do, you hope for the best. You hope it's pretty. You hope you're blessed by the ballet gods that day. It never occurs to you that you might be all you need. And so that day when I was going down in the Grand Plie, I realized, oh my gosh, I'm in control of this spaceship. I am at the controls. What an amazing thing. And of course, Pilates is also called contrology. That's another name for it. It's really about the control of movement. And Grand Plie in the center, that is such a great functional assessment exercise for ballet dancers. And it's wonderful when teachers put it in adagio combinations, because it's a moment where everyone can kind of tune in and go, okay, am I resisting gravity? Can I actually do this? Do I have equal turnout in both hips, etc.? So I just had a breakthrough, and I was like, oh my God. And I knew that it had been, I knew this wasn't luck. It wasn't luck. It wasn't the color of my leotard. It wasn't, whether I had coffee before class, whether they were playing my favorite music, whether the teacher liked me. It was none of those things, none. And, of course, this was way before social media too. So I hadn't seen some kind of special Instagram post or whatever. It was me, my body doing another Grand Plie, and I knew everything was going to be okay. I knew I could control it. And I was like, okay, that's it. I'm doing Pilates for the rest of my life. It's like I bought in at that moment. So that ended up really affecting me in a big, big way. And I started to get more involved over there at the dance medicine place. I started to become like a little cat in the studio. I spent as much time as I could there. And I kept doing my training. I was waiting tables at the time, and I was spending all my extra time at St. Francis. And they started recognizing that. They offered me a work exchange situation, so I could go and make copies of articles that they needed for courses they were teaching or who knows what. And I loved it. And I'll never forget too, I was down in the hospital basement copying something, and it happened to be a piece of anatomy on the turnout muscles. And I remember looking at it going, what? We have turnout muscles? I didn't even know I had no idea we had muscles that turned our legs out. I was like, you got to be kidding me. This is amazing. How can I find these muscles? What do these muscles feel like when I use them? Blah, blah, blah. And then sure enough, I realized the more I started learning and the more I started feeling, that my teachers, the ones at Academy of Ballet that were so good, I realized, oh, wow, so many of the cues that I'm already being given, I know now why these cues work, because these teachers are intuitively understanding anatomy themselves, even though they haven't been formally trained in it. I mean, there's many, many ballet teachers out there who do get it. They have an intuitive idea and correct understanding of how the body works. So that's encouraging. Mm-hmm. And then my parents died, and I had to come back to Los Angeles, and Elizabeth Larkham referred me to Marie-José Blom. And that's when I ended up at Long Beach Dance Conditioning. And then she became my mentor for life, really. And then within her studio, I learned about gyrotonic, because we had some gyrotonic equipment there and gyrotonic instructors. And I started doing that as well. And then several years later, I started doing all the certifications for gyrotonic. And then in those years at the same time, I started dancing over at Lords and Ballet Center, South Bay Ballet. And it was great because I started the Pilates teacher training course. And then I started to try out all these ideas I was learning on the dancers I was dancing with. And it was great. It was just like a laboratory. And then over the years, as I started to learn a little bit more about the gyrotonic expansion system, I started to become a master trainer for gyrokinesis. And because the gyrotonic method is different than Pilates, it looks more at energy. And also it looks at two things. It looks at bones and energy. So how do you arrange your bones? How do your bones move? How do your joints move? And how can you combine that awareness with an awareness of energy moving through your body? So, and if you're in the master trainer program, you have to figure it out and you have to really know what you're doing. And the training program is excellent because it's very comprehensive. You do a lot of education in that. So I started to play with that as well. And then I was allowed to introduce gyrokinesis into their curriculum. And so that gave me more to play around with. So the dancers that I was teaching there for 17 years, we worked with the Pilates method, but we also worked with gyrokinesis and the gyrotonic method. And then the best thing about this situation is that I also taught them ballet. So I had these dancers for ballet technique, point class, and variations. And I was also involved in staging some ballets while I was there, Sleeping Beauty, Nutcracker, things like that, Cinderella. And so I learned so much because I also learned the individuality of different dancers' bodies and even their minds also. And so you learn to play with which ideas will help people. And one year was especially rich because we ended up with a schedule that allowed me to kind of have a special kind of time each week where it was a release class. But what I chose to do with that time was to also introduce anatomy to the dancers, because I feel as though much of the time what's missing is they just don't know how their body works. And if they can get more information about that, it can prevent a lot of the frustration that they have, a lot of and this isn't even whether or not they're injured. This is just them like being frustrated that they're not getting better, you know? So for example, I would have entire lectures on the psoas, I would bring in all my books. We would talk about the psoas. They would learn where it is, blah, blah, blah. And, yeah, so I did that. And then in the last few years that I was at Lords and Ballet Center, it really started to come together for me. I started to realize, oh, wow, this is all, a number of things were happening. I was able to help dancers recover from injuries, rehab, get back to their dancing, and then also do it better. I was also able to help people who were doing, Prix de Lausanne, something like that, and get in. It's hard to even get into that. I was coaching variations and finding ways that this anatomical and energetic sort of cueing was helping with artistry as well as just technique. And I was still, by this point, sort of teaching Pilates courses and gyrokinesis courses and things. And I don't know, it kind of just all began to build. And then I did my first Inner Life of Ballet workshop in 2011 and started with kind of 5 topics all on one day, just kind of sharing some cueing and some approaches that I had found that were very effective. And then in the decade or so since then, I've just continued to sort of play. And then in 2020, during the pandemic, we were all locked down. And I realized, well, you know what, this is really a good time to sort of get going with these ideas and start really kind of making some courses and putting this out there. And I decided to apply for a trademark, and I received the trademark. So I trademarked the term Inner Life of Ballet. And then I had an ongoing class that met like about 3 days a week during the pandemic. And I just started to look at these topics, things like turnout, petit allegro, arabesque, port de bras. And then as we came out of the pandemic, I launched the program in August of 2021 with the port de bras as the first topic.
And
yeah. Okay. Your turn to talk now.
Yeah. That's great. And you spoke of how we as dancers, our bodies, we don't always understand what's happening. We're just kind of doing, or we're copying, we're mimicking. And then going back to the very beginning where you were saying you're doing it for the approval of the teacher. Are they watching? Do I have the right leotard on? All those things.
Yes.
This really creates a very false sense of awareness. And I'm 100% speaking from experience in my training as well. And that's something that I see in the dancers I see as well when they first come in is I don't know why my legs are turning out, but I know they are. And I think I should get them to this level or this extreme openness because that is what everyone else does. That's what my teacher is saying, or that's what I'm understanding.
Right.
And so when they can really hone in and understand the feeling in their body, the activation, and then apply it into the studio, that's when we start to see that success. And you've had so much practice with that. I want to ask you, I have a ton of turnout questions for you.
Sure. Fire away.
I'm going to start with, I want to ask you what you feel are one or two of the biggest misunderstandings about turnout in the ballet world. What are the two biggest ones that you hear all the time that you maybe feel like if we take care of this, we're on a really good track towards having our best turnout?
Yes. Two misconceptions. Number one, the idea, how do you condense this? The idea that turnout is about opening only, that it's only about an opening action, and that if you just keep opening, it's going to get better. That's the first misconception. The second misconception is the idea that everyone can improve and open completely.
Mm-hmm.
So, number one, there's, in my opinion, a misunderstanding of the action of turnout. And also, I want to say that because of that, there's also a misunderstanding of the meaning of turnout. And then number two, there's this cookie cutter idea that everybody can get to the same place with turnout.
Yeah. So that 180 open to the side.
The 180
against
open
the wall.
Open your knee, get your knees open. And this is the cue that is universally used more than anything. Get your knees all the way to the side. Your turnout has to be flat. Mm-hmm. And I know that you know, as well as what I know, and other colleagues of ours, they know this too. If you ask the students that you're working with, what are your teachers saying? Some of the things you hear are just incredible. One example is your turnout has to be flat. It has to be all the way to the side, and I don't care how you do it. I don't care how you get it. It has to be flat.
Mm-hmm. It's a big one.
It's a big one.
Yeah.
It's a big one. And the thing is that, number one, not everybody can have flat turnout. Number two, that's not all there is to the story. Because again, that's only looking at turnout as an opening action. And so the first thing, and here's the other thing I think is really interesting. If you talk to the dance medicine portion of the ballet world, so all of the great physical therapists that work with dancers, and the movement educators, but mainly the physical therapists that work with dancers, the first thing they're going to say is, okay, let's assess how much turnout your joint is actually capable of doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's teach you how to fire your deep external rotator muscles so that you can really find your turnout from your hips and not your feet. So that's the typical thing that happens with that. And the issue with that is that what the dancers don't understand is that, and the teachers don't get this either most of the time, is that turnout is actually a closing action. If you look at the anatomy of the deep hip external rotators, when a person spins their femur head in their socket, it happens because of a closing action. It works exactly the way the rotator cuff muscles of the shoulder work. It's a closing action. Something opens because the back closes. And what I find working with dancers in ballet class, like when I teach ballet class, or either if I'm teaching a dance conditioning class or if I'm teaching a ballet technique class, if I stop and I ask dancers, where are your turnout muscles? Where are they on your body? Most of them touch their inner thighs.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, here, touching their inner thighs. And if I ask them, what does it feel like when you turn out? They indicate it's very vague. They indicate a vague opening idea. And so, and then physical therapists and people who study turnout, like all of the research studies that have looked into turnout, the interesting thing is that they talk a lot about how dancers have a hard time finding their turnout muscles because they tend to clench their glutes and or tuck, and they just can't get the awareness of how these muscles work. So researchers and clinicians are always talking about that, and dancers are always trying to open and get more. And what I find is really interesting is that I think what's missing in all of this is that it's the intention in the dancers' minds that is the problem. They're not intending to feel that something is closing. So that's why they can't feel an awareness of their deep external rotator muscles, because they're thinking that they should be sensing an opening. And actually what it is a closing. It's a closing that causes an opening, that causes a closing. It's a spiral, it's a circle, it's ongoing. There's an opening and a closing. And so I did this several months ago. I was teaching a ballet class and we were doing jumps and nobody had any power and they weren't getting up into the air and they weren't maintaining their turnout in the air. And I stopped and I talked about turnout a little bit, and we did an exercise, just a visual, to find this closing action. And then they all did 8 sautés in first again and flew. They were flying up and down. It was amazing to look at. They had the backs of their thighs plugged in. They were narrowing. Turnout is a gathering action. And the meaning of turnout is a gathering of energy that moves you through space. Our turnout muscles are there to help us do ballet. They're not just there to make us prettier than the person behind us. They are our partners. We partner ourselves by turning out once we understand what turnout's about. So my favorite thing to say about turnout is that we don't hold our turnout. Our turnout holds us. And not only that, it partners us. It connects our legs into our bodies, brings us up onto releve, brings us into space, helps us jump, helps us get up on our legs. It's everything. And it helps our artistry, because if our turnout's connected correctly, it actually places our center of gravity right underneath us so that our arms and our upper body can be free for really beautiful fluid port de bras. It's everything.
When I figured out in my own body, too late, after I finished dancing, after I had labral tears, what turnout felt like. I actually, you talk about having a memory in your body.
Yeah.
I remember having that feeling for the first time, which is like, makes me put my head in my hands. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I went through a whole vigorous training, years and years, and never felt these muscles the way I did after. I remember crying because I was like, this is so powerful, so strong, everything I needed. And I didn't do it in all of my training. It wasn't there for me. And the amount of support that I had and that I see now my dancers have, and dancers when they find it, it's incredible. And it really is, as you're saying, it's a partner, and it doesn't feel like this elusive thing that your legs are flopping in the air. You're trying to maintain. I feel like I see dancers as I start working with them where it's like they're trying to maintain something that they have no ability to maintain, because you can't maintain it without muscular control. And it's that elusive opening, as you're saying, or just like throwing the legs to the side, essentially.
Right.
And it's hard, and it has a kind of a panicky feeling to it when you're trying to accomplish the insanity that is asked in ballet technique without having that support system there for you.
Yeah, I mean, I like to say about this too, and this is all in this topic of misconceptions, where the idea is that it's all about an opening, and so they use the French word en dehors, open, spiral out, and then the reverse of that is to spiral in, which is en dedans. En dedans is going in, en dehors is going out. So then I made up a third term. Which is kind of fun right now too, considering that there's so much cultural change regarding, binary and non-binary and stuff like that. I'm like, well, let's just go on board with that. So I made up a new term that I'm calling en de in. So it's not en dehors or en dedans, it's en de in. And so your rotator muscles, when you find them and you get the feeling of how they actually connect your legs into your body, that's a feeling of gathering. It's a narrowing. It's an en de in. And so I find that feeling is, I think, one of the things that's tricky for dancers is that they don't mind working really, really hard, because that kind of super dedicated hard work and discipline is actually part of being a dancer. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with that. And if a person doesn't have it, they can forget it in terms of trying to have a professional career as a dancer. Like, they have to have a strong work ethic. But we want the effort that people make to be productive and supportive. And once they find this connection, they'll sense that. They'll sense that it's challenging, but once it's there, it's liberating.
Yeah, it is. I have a question that's coming to mind. When you said that one of the things that is misunderstood is that we're all searching for
flat
type A. This is what your turnout is. I have my feeling on this, but what do you feel about the ratio, and not a precise ratio, but about the ratio of the opening of the leg and the rotation of the leg and the lines that can create for a dancer who has 180-degree turnout and someone who has much smaller range? I see dancers worrying so much about how far their legs open, but then forgetting that there is this rotational aspect, or as you're saying, this en de in, this closing, that when we see that, the line changes, sometimes dramatically. And I think that might be a missing point for a lot of dancers, is the combination of the two, not just the opening of the legs.
So often what's misunderstood is the difference between rotating the leg in the socket and pushing the leg out to the side. And pushing the leg out to the side is abduction, or abduction, we sometimes say, so that people can hear the language clearly. That's abduction. Rotating is very purely spinning the leg into the socket. I find, if you're talking about a position such as a la seconde, for example, and putting the working leg out to the side in a la seconde, what I find can be really helpful, and we haven't talked about this yet, but it's really whether or not it's really where a person's hip sockets face. Mm-hmm. So there are people who have hip sockets that face more forwards rather than sideways. And that's the biggest thing. If a person has more forward facing hip sockets, their knees are not going to go all the way to the side. If they have more sideways facing hip sockets, the knees will go more to the side. Same goes for if the knee is extended and the leg is a la seconde. They're honest and authentic a la seconde for a more forward facing hip socket ballet dancer. Their leg is going to be slightly in front of them to the side. I find that this can be helpful. Allow them to do that. So it's really more of a diagonal, but have them work with quite a bit of conscious awareness during rond de jambes so that they can feel during a rond de jambe that they travel through their honest placed a la seconde. But then there's a moment in every single rond de jambe where it has to go all the way side and go into that abduction position. That's the place that they want to train consciously in, but move through. So they're not going to hold that flat side position, but they are going to visit it for a split second with every rond de jambe.
I like that. There's many professional dancers that when you look at them, their pictures on stage, you see that their turnout is not 180 degrees to the side. And this is something that we spent quite a time in your course looking at and seeing these stunning ballerinas that you look at as the picture of turnout. And when you really look, you realize, oh, their leg is not 180 degrees to the side, but no one would dare tell them their leg was not turned out gorgeously. So these are dancers who have learned how to use their anatomy and perfect the line that is required of ballet, but it's not to this extreme standard that everyone, again, is trying to meet.
Yeah. I mean, I think what things would be better if things would be better if the ballet, I don't want to say the ballet world, the ballet studio, if ballet teachers gave more how and why cues instead of just what cues, it would pave the way for dancers to be able to discover more about how their body works. And you would have a really beautiful increase in artistry. And also, I think you would find more dancers discovering the relationship between technique and artistry. Because one of the things I find still happens is that people think of those things as two separate things. There's technique and there's artistry. When I watch beautiful ballerinas, I see a fusion of those two things. I don't see that there's anything different between those two things. And what I notice is that actually turnout is how they're weaving those things together. They're using their turnout process to marry their technique with their artistry. And this business about what it looks like, it's, I mean, obviously there's an aesthetic. But when someone is forcing something and has no use of it, no practical functional use of it, that really needs to be acknowledged. I mean, the dancer feels it. I mean, this is the situation where you have, the dancer will have turnout at the bar and then they'll come to the center and they'll feel and look like a totally different dancer. because they've been using the bar to help them force their turnout. And the thing that's interesting too about, you're talking about misconceptions and stuff. There's this interesting idea about whether you should force your turnout or whether you should not force your turnout. And again, I think it's a situation where it's not this binary thing that you're either going to force it or not force it. I think neither one of those things is true. You're going to activate your turnout. Mm-hmm. And that means you're going to involve every part of your physicality and your energetic awareness. When you're warming yourself up at the bar, you're going to find opposition. You're going to create space in your joints. You're going to partner yourself with your turnout. And yes, you're going to use the bar. Don't not use the bar, because what's the point of it if you're not using it? But the point of the bar is not to help you be a faker and just do the what of turnout. The point of the bar is to do the how and the why of turnout, so that when you come to the center, you're ready to dance. So the thing about turnout is that I feel like we need to start asking different questions about it, like you and I are doing right now. We need to ask different questions about it. We need to use different language in the way that we look at it and the way that we train it. For example, too, with people doing dance conditioning, like people who aren't teaching ballet class or something like that, they're just maybe teaching dance conditioning or a Pilates session or diatonic session, whatever. I feel like it's very important to not compartmentalize the dance conditioning repertoire so that you're only always doing turnout related exercises that don't work with gravity, that don't have the dancer in gravity or standing on one leg or doing something with their arms and upper body while they're on one leg, because that's how you're going to close that gap. One of the reasons I created the Inner Life of Ballet is to try to close this gap. There's a big, big gap between the help that dancers can get from movement educators, physical therapists. There's a big gap between the great information they get from that and what they're able to apply to their actual dancing in the ballet studio. And one of the things that we can all do as dance conditioning specialists is make sure that when we work with dancers, it's not just that we're doing clams.
Yeah. That we're asking them and assisting them to figure out how to use it in a motion and a movement. And that's when the buy-in happens as a mover.
Yes.
When you're like, oh, that paid off. The work that I just spent 45 minutes on paid off. And now I feel something different in class. One of the big things I always say is, like, your conditioning should make a difference in your classwork.
Yes.
There's no instant results. It's not a magic, fairy godmother. And now you have perfect fill in the blank, but you should feel a difference after your session, after your work. And there should be a difference in how you feel accomplishing the thing you're there for, which is to become a better dancer and understanding your body better. So that's the tie that I constantly try to make, and learning more and more how it happens for everybody a little bit differently, and the vocabulary we use to inspire that, the images we use. And this is why constantly being the student and learning becomes so valuable to me. And I know to you and other movement educators and teachers. I mean, anybody who's trying to assist someone to accomplish something, there has to be that element of always learning for myself to better assist someone else.
And you know what I want to say too? What's coming up in my mind too that I think this might be really helpful for people to hear, is that here's the thing. A lot of professional dancers are trying to figure out how to get better roles. They want to dance better roles and they want to get promoted. And they're trying to figure out how to do that. And one of the things I notice is that artistic directors and ballet masters have an incredible eye. They know what they're looking at and they know what they're looking for. And they're looking for artists who are compelling to watch. They're looking for artists who catch their eye, and they're looking for somebody that they simply can't, they can't not watch this person. And so when you look at that, and then you think about these pre-professional dancers that we work with who are trying to get in, they're trying to get into their summer intensive, their trainee programs, junior companies, etc., get their first contract. If you think about what we just said so far about, the what, the how, the why, the mirror, what does it look like? A jump needs to be made so that this dancer is actually dancing for themselves, not because they're trying to win approval. It's never about whether the teacher likes you. It's never about that. It's about whether you have something to offer. It's about whether your experience with your art form, which includes discovering how your body works, it's about whether that is a compelling enough journey for you that it's putting something out there into space. It's changing the energy of the space around you in such a way that people can't take their eyes off you. That's what gets you better roles. And period. For me, it's a dead giveaway that a dance student, it's a dead giveaway that it's not going to work out for the dance student if I walk past them in a class and they look at me. They watch me watching them.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, are you watching me? Are you watching me? And I'm like, I don't know. Are you doing something? Because I'm not here to give you attention. I'm here to correct you, and I'm here to give you information, and I'm here to help you. But this isn't about me giving you attention. This is about you loving your art form so consciously that you can tell a story, and you can express the music, and you can change my day. I feel better about life because of the way that you're dancing, and not just your artistry, but your technique and the blend of the two,
Mm-hmm.
So I also have the deepest respect too for young people who decide they want to become professional dancers, because it's a highly rewarding thing to do professionally, but it also requires an incredible amount of devotion and
Sure
resilience.
does.
And the more mental health support they can get, the better. And yet, here's the thing I think is really interesting. I think that in terms of mental health, we want to understand how meditation can be so great for mental health, and that dancing is your meditation. So in other words, you're so involved with your own journey and so unconcerned about whether this teacher likes you
Mm-hmm.
that you're there for that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just some more thoughts on how that all comes together.
I mean, that it's a really beautiful example of what you're saying, where your technique and your artistry carry you through to come together and be the dancer that you are, and they're not separate. I know from the feeling of Turnout, from the way that it carries you through space, it feels elegant and graceful and almost royal in the way that I can hold my body, as opposed to whatever else is happening. And there is no way for me to be in anything other than my own self and my own Turnout when I feel that. And guilty as charged, there have been those times where I'm that like, oh, someone walked in the room, or they're watching. Oh, what's happening?
Yeah.
But finding the finding the love and the dedication to completely not give anything for someone else, but make it all about yourself is a lifetime endeavor. But I really love what you're saying about people looking to move themselves forward in their dance career. And I don't think I could have said it any clearer or better as to what I see in a dancer when they just have that little extra thing. It's like, what makes them a better dancer? They don't have turnout that opens to whatever. They don't have extensions that go on to the other side of their head, but there is just something that's almost feels intangible. And you put a really nice word to it.
They have confidence. They have confidence. And the confidence is not just this mental will that I'm going to do this. Yes, they have to have that, but it's actually a physical confidence because they are not dancing from a place of anxiety because, they're up on their legs.
Mm-hmm.
Period. End of story. You have to get up on your legs. And so here's the other thing about like these misconceptions and maybe a new way of looking at turnout, right? Turnout should help you get up on your leg. It's not the idea that you're trying to open and hold your turnout and then get up on your leg. No, your turnout process actually is what gets you up on your leg. There's no difference between the two things. So dancers who are showing that kind of compelling, total ownership of what they're doing, confidence, they're up on their legs, period. Period. Once you're up on your legs, you can do stuff. You can pirouette, you can releve 32 times, you can do beautiful port de bras while you're doing all of that. You can tell a story, you can do mime, you can be partnered, you can dance a grand pas de deux and get on your leg, because you're using your turnout to partner yourself while some other person is partnering. You have two partners. How great is that? You have three partners. You have the music. You have four partners. You have the audience. There's so many things helping you. It doesn't have to be a struggle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Once we can get the information out there and help the dancers to apply it, it's no longer a struggle. It's really not. Most of the dancers I work with, when they find certain connections, oftentimes the first thing they'll say is, "Oh my gosh, I don't feel as tense."
Mm-hmm.
And then usually the next question is, "Am I doing it right?"
Yeah.
So, and so there's often there's another misconception that tension is energy. A lot of dancers feel that the tension that they feel because of the amount of work they're putting into making a connection or doing a step or whatever, they feel that tension and that effort is what's energizing their dancing. And that is one of the biggest misconceptions that we want to help address. Tension and energy are not the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And oftentimes too, when dancers are putting too much effort into things, they will feel that they run out of energy in like a variation, for example, or a hard grand allegro combination or a long pas de deux. They'll feel like they just don't have the stamina. And sometimes, yes, they need to be working with their cross training that they're getting more cardiovascular, more things working with stamina. But quite often, it's because they don't have an efficiency in the way that they're doing basic things.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I feel like there's so many moments in the last 10 minutes where I've just felt like I want to drop the mic for you. Yeah. Well, I have one more big turnout question for you. How much of turnout has to do with your flexibility is turnout a flexibility motion? Is it something that by stretching in certain ways, we increase our turnout. What do you think about that?
For people who have sideways facing hip sockets, absolutely no. There is nothing that flexibility will do for those people to improve their turnout. For people with sideways facing hip sockets, so what I mean by that is that, you can wake them up at 3:00 in the morning and they can do a perfect fifth position.
Mm-hmm.
And then they can do a grand plie in second and their knees go behind them. So those kinds of people, they don't need to do any stretching at all in terms of turnout, nothing. For people with more forward-facing hip sockets, they will benefit from some stretching. They will benefit from doing stretching to the hip capsule, to their gluteals, to their inner thighs, their groin. They will benefit from all kinds, and also to the front of the hip, so the hip flexor area, the psoas, the iliopsoas. They'll benefit from those things. However, if they tuck when they go to turn out, they will booby trap and how do you say this? They'll undo everything that the stretching helped to accomplish. Also, the amount of turnout that they will get after doing a flexibility program is minimal. It's very, very minimal. So the bottom line is, if your knees don't open all the way to the side, there's nothing, and it's likely that that's because your hip sockets face more forwards than sideways. You can do a flexibility program, learn one, do it regularly, work with somebody to help you figure out how to lift your pelvis up, rotate the legs inside of the sockets, and then open the knees as you go down. But if you're standing at the bar next to somebody who has sideways facing hip sockets, their knees are going to be more to the side than yours. That's the reality. That's the reality.
And so many dancers focus so highly on the flexibility aspect of turnout. They spend a lot of time stretching their inner thighs, and mostly their inner thighs. And then they stand up and we're right back at that situation where they're using the bar and they're forcing and holding and shaking and gripping. And then they come into the center and they go, where did my turnout go? Why can't I? And it's like, it's an action. It's something that has to be, it's a movement that's constantly there. And especially the passive stretching is inhibiting the action that needs to be happening of your turnout. So there has to be a balance of this.
This is a total waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here to say this today on Ali Christensen's podcast. It's a complete waste of time. So not only that, if they want to be able to do entrechatsis or brisé or any of the more intermediate advanced petit allegro repertoire, you don't want to be doing passive adductor stretching prior to class, period. Mm-hmm. End of story. There needs to be they need to find the turnout muscles and fire them. And they need to do that with, at the same time, understanding how to push down through their standing leg and pull up through the crown of their head, so that from their pelvis down, it's a grounding action. And from their pelvis up, it's an elevating action. So that right around the joint, around the hip joint itself, they can feel some space, some separation. Then they can spin inside and they can use the muscles in the tops of the backs of the legs to hold the spin. That's what they have to find. Mm-hmm. And then here's another idea too for teachers. Instead of saying, get your knee all the way to the side, they could say something like, get your knee all the way to your side. It's only one word that needs to be changed in that like archetypal sentence. Of course, we're not saying here in this conversation that we're meaning that the knees not open as far as they possibly can. Of course, that's what we want to do. But we need to honor what's possible in a person's body. And then here's the deal, and this is what my iAdams presentation is all about. It's not just about what happens on the way down in a plie. It's about what happens on the way up. What are we doing for turnout on the way up? Because that's what talks to the establishment of a standing leg, which then becomes a releve leg, which then becomes a leg that goes on point, which then becomes a leg that goes into the air. So it's not, there's only 50% of the time that we're going down. The other 50% of the time we're going up, and because ballet is going to go up, and it's movement. So we can't just be giving turnout cues when someone goes down into plie.
Mm-hmm. It's a game changer when that feeling of spiraling, of separation, of opposition happens with the grounding of the standing leg. It's a big game changer. And you say what you've experienced dancers saying when they feel, am I working hard enough? I always hear dancers say, it's a weird sense of work, but freedom. Like, I'm not sure what I'm feeling, because it's not gripping. It's not high effort, but it's a new sensation for a lot of dancers. And that freedom that it creates is kind of shocking. Like, well, why can't I feel the gripping in my hip flexors or the tucking of my pelvis, or why am I not squeezing my butt cheeks together with everything I got? But it's a very freeing feeling. And it's that feeling, I think, is on the up, as you're saying. So I'm so excited to learn more as you put this information together and come back from iAdams and go into your next workshop. Definitely be there. For everyone who's listening, where can they find more information on Inner Life of Ballet?
For right now, Instagram is the main place. So I started an Instagram page, the Inner Life of Ballet. They can look me up there, and I will be announcing any kinds of things that I'm doing on there, whether it's online classes or courses or workshops or in-person workshops. I prefer in-person workshops. It's really hard to learn online and teach online. It's possible, but it's not ideal. But I'll be offering them because that's the world we're in right now too, right? I mean, thanks to the pandemic, everyone's learned how to teach online and learn online. So I'll be offering, so everything's on there. Everything's on Instagram. That's where you find me, and feel free. People can message me too. I'm happy to answer questions and things like that.
Lovely. Well, I will link everything right here so they have it. And I have to just say to everyone listening, whether you're a student or a teacher, what Alicia does and the information that you will get by working with Alicia is out of this world. I have not found very many trainers, teachers, master instructors who teach teachers well. There are people who can teach dancers well. There are people who can do it in their own bodies, but teaching a teacher to then repeat the information and do it well is unique. And if you're a student, you are the teacher as well. You are teaching your own body and knowing how to inform your body and with information that actually makes a difference in how you show up in the studio. This is a place that I would highly recommend. And Alicia is someone that I search out. So if anybody likes what I have to say, you're going to love what Alicia has to say. So go find her information and follow along on Instagram and keep your eye out for her workshops. Definitely would be worth your time, whether it's in person or virtual.
Thanks, Allie.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for spending your time. We could talk so much more, I know, but I'm really grateful for the information that you have here and your clarity, and you're so good with your words and what you're feeling in the body. And it's wonderful. So thank you so much for taking this time.
Thank you, Allie. Thanks so much.
Thank you all for listening. I hope that this sparked some turnout curiosity within yourself. You can always ask questions and reach me at Align Fitness by Allie on Instagram or alignedfitnessbyali.com. I'm happy to answer any questions that I can. I know that Alicia would be happy to answer any questions, so you can reach out to her. And as always, I hope that this podcast gives you a little taste of something different, something that you can explore within yourself. This is it for this week. So I will see you all next time right back here at Beyond the Point.